Right. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well today. To all of you tuning in on this webinar, thank you so much for joining us as we have another conversation, this time around our newly published book, The First Girl on Stage, Tunga Dances the Yakshagana, written by Shruthi Rao, illustrated by Devika Joglekar, and published by Sambasivan and Parikh and Yali Books. So, the goal of these webinars is really just to give a bit more context and a deeper dive into the books that we publish. Sambashivan and Parikh is a small press based in upstate New York, and we amplify diasporic perspectives in children's literature. We have 3 imprints: Yali Books, Modern Marigold Books, and our newest imprint, First Person Press. So today joining us, we have some incredible women. First up, we have Shruthi Rao, who is the author of this beautiful book. Shruthi is the author of 20 fiction and nonfiction books published in India and in the US. She holds a master's degree in energy engineering and worked for a few years in tech before becoming a writer. She loves books, desserts, benches, trees, science, and long walks. Hi, Shruti. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Hi, lovely to be here.
Next up, we have Devika Joglekar. Devika is an author, illustrator, and animator based in the San Francisco Bay Area. She has illustrated more than 50 children's books and over a dozen graphic novels, poetry books, and comics. She is also a self-published children's book author with 17 books under her belt. Very impressive. Hi, Devika.
Hello, happy to hear.
Next up, we have Richa Bhavanam. She began her exploration of the visual medium with black and white film photography. This and her background in the social sciences form the cornerstones of her practice as a photographer and filmmaker. She is especially interested in documenting women centric narratives and loves that her work gives her a front row seat to witness some of the most fascinating stories. Hi, Richa.
Hi, thank you for having me here.
And Anjali Joshi. Anjali Joshi is a science teacher, curriculum developer, and the author of several children's books, including DIYAS at Circle Time, and several STEM related books, including an upcoming title called Built Like a Bug. She holds a master's degree in STEM education from the University of Oxford and is currently pursuing her PhD in AI in education. Hi, Anjali. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So, everyone here has a really beautiful, interesting connection to this book and to us as publishers. And we are really, really excited to dive into this panel, which is called When Girl You Can Do Anything Turns Into This Is What Girls Do. And we're talking about the social pressures girls face as they navigate school and careers. I'm going to turn things over to Ambika Sambashivan, who is my co publisher.
Hi, everyone. We are so honored to speak with all of you today. And truly, this is the reason why we publish. So here's the beautiful book that is now out in stores. This is called The First Girl on Stage, Tunga Dances the Yakshagana by Shruthi Rao and Devika Joglekar. It is a absolute visual and a textual treat. It has this beautiful story of a child called Tunga who wants to pursue this art form that was at some point in time was considered not appropriate for women to pursue. And then things changed in the 80s and 90s when women began to take on roles in Yakshagana and form troops. This story is beautiful, and I would like to point out that the title is a big clue. It says it's the first girl on stage, and really this is the start of a movement. So it tries to document what began as one woman entering the sphere and then making space for so many women to follow her. We're so proud to publish this because this amplifies the feminist viewpoint of Yali Books, the imprint that has published this. And really creates a space for conversation to talk about what it means to pursue something, what are some gendered expectations in society, and how do you still pursue your passions even when you're told that it's not appropriate for you. And we are excited to kick off the conversation with the author, Shruthi. It's been a wonderful journey working with you. You are an absolute dream to work with. So thank you so much for creating the story and working with us as we work through different versions of it. But go back to the beginning and tell us what really inspired you to write this. I know you interviewed performers as well. What was the seed of the story? And if you could talk a little bit more about how it connects to your own personal life as you pursued careers, and what lessons we can draw from this book.
Yeah, thank you. This story has been close to my heart for a long time, and I really couldn't have dreamed of anything better. It's come out beautifully. So how it began is I was always a fan of Yakshagana, but sometime in Bangalore in 2014, I had been to a children's Yakshagana concert. And then as I sat through it, there was this one kid who was playing Krishna, and that kid was just phenomenal, jumping across stage, so much energy, absolutely mind-blowing. After the concert, I went backstage to congratulate the kid, and for some reason, maybe it was my own stereotypes talking, I had assumed it was a boy, and it turned out to be a girl. And then I realized that behind the costume, it didn't matter whether it was a boy or a girl or whatever. So I came home with that image in my mind about a little girl in costume on stage, and it doesn't matter what gender you are. So that was the seed of the story. I wrote one version, and it went through a lot of evolution and all that. And then finally, I was able to talk to, interview real Yakshagana practitioners who have been practicing from 30 years, 35 years. And I spoke to them and heard about their incredible journey, about how it was so hard for them to kind of break into this. So Yakshagana, I don't know if you have actually watched it. It's very it's based on valor and anger and all these masculine emotions, and all these dances are like larger than life. You have to like jump on stage, you have to sit with your legs apart, you have to walk with your legs apart. It's very masculine. So over the centuries, it wasn't even considered that women could do it. So finally, one of these women, some women across the state, I think across the state of Karnataka, started nearly at the same time starting to learn and try to bring other women into it and then start performing. So it was a movement that happened at that time. And I spoke to Purnima Yatish Rai, who is the founder of Mahaganapati Mahila Yakshagana Sangha. And she was telling me how people laughed at them and people mocked them, and the people even shunned them because they were like, I mean, they are, who are these women standing on stage and behaving like men, And it wasn't urban, it was a rural kind of a rural setup. And all this in spite of the fact that Purnima herself was from a Yakshagana family. So for her itself, it was hard. And uh, she was telling me that not only, okay, all these societies impressions and people putting her down and all that was a part of it, but then there was another part of it. Learning was okay, and performing in their own village, in their own surroundings was okay. How about going outside the village and performing elsewhere? So that was hard because the male Yakshagana artists could, kind of relieve themselves in the bushes. They can wash themselves at the well, and they can spread a mat and lie down under the sky, and it would be okay. But for women, it wasn't possible. So there was not only uh, uh, society's impressions about it, it was also a kind of a systemic disadvantage. It wasn't safe. As simply put, it wasn't safe. So that in fact, when she told me that, it reminded me of something that I in my own journey. So I did my master's in energy engineering, and energy engineering consisted of non-renewable energy and also energy management. So energy management involved going to factories and auditing how much energy is being spent and so on. So in college, I had this company come in for recruitment, and I applied. Although although non-renewables were my first love, I said, why not apply for this energy management company? And 5 minutes into the interview, the panel, all male panel, they just stopped and they started kind of looking at each other and smiling. So I said, what happened? So they said, I know you have applied and we are obliged to interview you, but we cannot give you the job. Women can't do it. Immediately, I raised my cudgels and I'm like, what do you mean women can't do it? I have already gone to, a part of my projects. I have actually gone into industries, and I have actually conducted energy audits and so on. So another man said, no, it's not like women can't do it. Many of these industries are in remote areas, and we cannot assure that you will be safe. So I said, once again, some of this, but this was 25 years ago almost. So things may have changed now. I mean, there are phones, there are communications, there are a lot of stuff. So what I'm trying to say is stereotypes sometimes happen for a reason. Not all stereotypes, not all of them. Some of them are for a particular reason, safety or convenience or what. But we must always be aware that circumstances change. The world has moved on, and so we have to evaluate every situation and say, is it still valid? Is my argument still valid? And then move on. So it reminded me of that, that parallels. Although mine was, so I didn't fight because it wasn't my first choice of interest, and I was like, yeah, maybe not. So, but what would have happened if I had fought, if I had protested? I don't know really. So, yeah, but I held back, but the Mahila Yakshagana people did not hold back. That's the difference.
That's absolutely fascinating. So when a girl is told she can't do something, it's probably, there's so many factors that go into why that is said. And that is an incredible way of looking at that statement and breaking it down into systemic barriers. Thank you, Shruthi.
Very interesting. Thank you so much, Shruti. That was wonderful to hear about your your very personal connection to this story. Devika, moving on to you. You did beautiful work on the illustrations. We are just blown away with how the book came together, and you're such a joy to work with. Like, you were just so wonderful to work with. You were, oh my gosh, it was a wonderful process. Did you feel a personal connection to Dunga's story? And was there a particular part that really resonated with you as the illustrator?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I could see myself in her shoes because, like many of us, I did engineering and I never thought of pursuing a career in as an artist. So I actually started drawing when I was in the engineering college. But I always love sequential art and picture books. And I was fortunate enough to see lots of picture books from around the world, thanks to my parents. And I was a huge fan of RJ, who created Tintin. And in back of my mind, I always used to think like, I want to do something like this, but I didn't know how to draw. But during my 4 years in engineering, I came to realization that, somehow I want to work in this field, and I started drawing. And just like Tunga, I'm a self-taught artist. So I started doodling my professors, my friends, and by the fourth year, I could actually draw. And that was the time when I decided to pursue a dream as an artist. So I worked in tech for 6 months, and I left that job. And that was the time when the actual struggle started, because I had no degree in arts. And this was again 20 years back in India, and there weren't many opportunities because there was no internet, was in a very initial stages. So actually, I had to struggle a lot to just find a job. So I started with a comic strip in local newspaper, because I knew nobody's going to hire me because I have no degree in graphic designing. And that is how actually I entered this field and started self-publishing. Then I got married, I came here and started working as a full-time animator illustrator. So I could really see Tunga's struggle. And if you have a dream and if you have courage to pursue a dream, then nothing is impossible. And another thing is, my mother, she comes from southern part of Karnataka, Mangalore, Udupi. So almost all my summer vacations as a child, I have spent there. And I have seen so many Yakshagana artists every summer. And I'm a huge, huge fan of that art form. And I never thought that I'll get an opportunity to do illustrations for Yakshagana book. And I remember 2, 3 years ago, I saw on Yali Books website, that Ambika has acquired Shruti's manuscript. And I just messaged Ambika that, I'm so happy that you are doing a book on Yakshagana. And she said, okay, I'll get in touch with you. And after last year, you guys contacted me, and it was really dream come true. So I'll say that dream big, and just pursue your dream. One day it will come true.
100%. What a beautiful message for young girls out there.
I love that you were self-taught, just like Tunga teaches herself.
Yeah.
That is a beautiful connection.
Yeah, totally. Because in India, you cannot change your major. Once you start in particular stream, you cannot change it. So it was really hard. And maybe because that time I was very young to take such a step of leaving the my tech career and pursue art. Yeah.
Go ahead, Ambika.
Okay, so let's move the conversation to Richa. We are so happy you could join us today. Richa, we used your photos in the book to showcase some of the performers, and a teacher as well with her class. And these are photographs that we used with your permission from a documentary that you did called Mahila Yakshagana, Where Women Become Heroes. So tell us a little bit about this project and what you learned during the process of photographing these women. And how do you see the stories of these women inspiring girls today?
Yeah, I mean, I was welcomed with open arms into the green room of Mahila Yakshagana, like it was just, I never felt like a stranger there. And Yakshagana happens in the sort of like coastal region of Karnataka, which is very far from Bangalore. And they just made me one of their own. And it was an absolute privilege to, have that openness, have that relationship. And I think being a woman definitely helped with just ease of access and it was that much easier to like build relationships of trust and friendships. And yeah, it was an absolute privilege to be there and to and what a spectacular thing it is to witness these women like becoming these fantastical characters, um yeah, you can't help but be sort of enthralled by that experience, and it really just takes you and transports you to a different world. But I think couple of things I've been wondering about from my experience there. One is that even in settings like these, which are advantages to women, right? It is a green room of women artists, and I'm a female photographer. I feel that we're still so tentative with our presence in that space. We don't wear conviction on our sleeves. We occupy space very gently. Um, as opposed to a lot of the men that I saw there who had like an easy ownership of the space, whether they were the musicians or the makeup artists or like the costume people. And even sometimes like relatives of the girls, like their fathers and husbands. And um, I wonder what it would be like to truly own a space and to have sort of like mm, complete freedom to shape its narrative, you know? And on a similar note, when I spoke to a lot of these women, they talked about how Yakshagana is very central to their identity, and it's one of the most cherished parts of their lives. But it still seems to exist in this sort of like peripheral manner. Um, and they're allowed to practice it when they're able to check off all of their other responsibilities at school and work and home and family. And yeah, that really got me thinking, what would a world be like where we're able to go after these things without it having to be pit against sort of like all of the other roles that we embody, you know? And still, against all of these odds, the sort of movement of Mahila Yakshagana has grown and flourished. It really started as a small flicker, as Shruti was talking to Purnamaka, and there was Sumanglaka. They, yeah, like 30, 40 years ago, it was really just a thought. But now it's a living, breathing, beautiful thing. Um, and I think that, that's really testament to them and also to all of the women who've come forward with like so much heart and pride for this performing art. Um, and for me, I think it's stories like these from smaller towns in India and villages where they're not necessarily fluent in the sort of like vocabulary of feminism. So the way that they express their endeavors is very different to how we would maybe like frame our thoughts or see our efforts. But they're so commendable. And they really are changing the landscape for not just, I mean, of course, the people of that region, but I think for all of us who work in predominantly male spaces, So, yeah, I think it's been an absolute joy sort of documenting and getting to know them, being let into that space and really celebrating this like story and this achievement of women performing Yakshagana not being a rare sight anymore. Yeah, and that's really beautiful. Yeah.
Oh, Richa, that
That's
hit
incredible.
hard on so
It
many
hit
levels.
home. Okay, I have something to share. I feel like Ambika, I can speak for both of us. We complain about this to each other all the time. This is such a relevant issue and conversation for women and girls, no matter what field you're part of, no matter where you're living, where you've grown up, what other factors are. Ambika and I talk about all the time. Like, we're building this publishing company, like tooth and nail, like trying everything. But we have to divide our time with so many other responsibilities that's expected for us to do. And it's often incredibly frustrating for us because we're like, gosh, if we didn't have to do all these other things that, quite frankly, our partners don't have to do a lot of them, because it's just a job that we've either taken on ourselves, or it's expected for us to do, or it's just kind of been that way. Which, it's fine. You're running a home and a life and a family, and there's a give and take in all parts of it. But we often wonder, if we didn't have to do any of these things, how much more progress could we make in a day, in a week, in a year, in 5 years? And so it's something that, despite being in a creative field that is not seen as a male-dominated field, we're it's a struggle for us in a different way looking at it. Ambika, did you want to add something before did you want to add
actually
anything?
very curious to ask Richa. You talked about they are tentative in the green room, like you cautiously occupy that space. You're very gentle. What happens when they get on stage? I'm just curious to note that.
It's a blast on stage, and it really is. I mean, the sort of transformation that happens in the green room of being this like woman in your regular life to like this like mythical character, it is it's it's wild. And you see them kind of like just their demeanor changes, and that's a really special thing to see and to witness. And I think also, like, I've been curious to know whether they feel a different sense of power and a different sense of freedom, as these male characters. And I think that some of them have said that they've been able to sort of tap into the male perspective because of just having played that character. And also, it's such a physical form, that it is a visceral experience. Um, yeah. And no, I mean, I think what I was saying earlier is that we are a little bit more hesitant and maybe more aware of just like how the space is around us, as opposed to just being, yeah, relaxed, easy, and boisterous even, which I think that, yeah, there is a sense of being more timid and considerate as women, which I think really seeps into most things that we do and most spaces that we kind of like govern, I feel. Um, and this was also for me. I mean, it wasn't just them, it was also me. Um, yeah. So it was, in that sense, I think, a shared experience.
Very interesting.
I
Really
just want to
wonderful to
add,
have you. Yeah, go ahead,
when
Shruti.
I was talking to Purnima, she actually mentioned that going on to stage is kind of shedding your real life and becoming somebody else. So she did mention that it's transformative, that you are somebody else there, and it's when you come and doing it in the company of other women who understand what it is to shed all the hang-ups and then go and be somebody else. It's amazing. So I think that is one of the things that keeps them going, that um, power, that feeling of abandon.
Yeah.
And
Amazing.
Richa, I agree with what you said about ticking off all the boxes and all that, because one of the things that kept coming up in the interview is that um, uh, their husbands are supportive. For everything, you need a man's support to say, yeah, my wife can do this. So that is still there. And that I think it'll take a while. And a lot of women uh, uh, give it up after having a baby, which is not just responsibility, but it kind of takes a toll on the body. So for all practical purposes, they have to drop out. Some of them drop out. So there is, and another thing is, even now, I think, Richa, you also must have seen that the actual performers may be women, but the people at the back with the instruments and the singers are still largely male. So one of the intentions of my of Purnima that I spoke to is that even those roles need to be taken up by women at some point. It is evolving, and hopefully it will happen.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think that I actually worked on a follow-up series, which is very different looking to this. But when I was talking to women for my second Yakshagana series, um, something that came up and something that I was very pleasantly surprised by and is very encouraging is that there are exceptions to this thing that I've been talking about. There are girls who are saying that nobody can stop me. I'm not going to get married to a guy who won't be okay with me performing Yakshagana. My husband has to my husband also likes performing Yakshagana, so we sort of take turns playing the parent. So that has been really, really encouraging just to see that, there are more and more girls who are defying these voices that tell you who you can be and what you can do. Yeah, so that's been lovely to see.
That's wonderful. Go ahead, Devika.
Yeah, when I was researching for illustrations, I was studying like how they actually wear the costumes. So I was going through some videos and some images, and I saw this one particular video where women in their late 30s, they were actually getting ready in a small village, getting ready for Yakshagana performance, and their kids were playing around. And after she was ready, the way the kid was looking at his mother with a mesmerized expression and pride, I was so happy. This is a huge step because in the next generation, when these kids will grow up, it won't be a taboo or nothing will stop women from actually performing on stage. So I absolutely love that, the whole series. And I just forgot to send you the link, but I will do that.
I
That's
also want to
wonderful. Yeah,
add,
they're living, breathing examples. Go ahead, Anjali.
yeah, no, just to, Shruti, when you said sometimes having children can be a hindrance, I would actually echo what Devika is saying and saying that, I went and did my master's, started writing books after because I want my boys to see it. Right. And because I want to be that role model, I want them to know that girls do big things. Right. So they will be future supportive partners. Right. And it's important, I think, is it challenging? Heck yeah. Right. Like it is very, very challenging balancing all the things, but it's so important that they see that. So I couldn't agree with you more, Devika. So thanks for kind of pointing the conversation in that direction as well. So don't let it be a hindrance, but in fact, make it an opportunity for empowerment and a teachable moment for young boys.
I love that 100%. And what a perfect segue into the next portion of this, where I was going to talk to you, Anjali, and get your insight. So, in preparation for this webinar and to really talk about this conversation, sometimes, again, being from within a creative field, sometimes it's hard for me to see how relevant is this conversation right now? Like, is this something that's still being, or have we made enough progress? Like, from the time that Shruti was interviewing for her job, has that progress been made? And Ambika and I came across an interesting article written by a psychologist named Dr. Gail Post, and she published an article literally this September, a few months back, and it was called "The Many Reasons Why Women and Girls Abandon STEM Fields." And it basically highlights the various pressures at different ages that girls and women face when trying to pursue a career path in STEM. And it just showed us, that the universal thread that runs through this story that ties it to the North American audience very much, even despite it being a very specific performing arts form from South India, it's is this. It's still very much needed to be discussed and centered for our young girls growing up today, and we need to be having this conversation with them. So in that light, we asked Anjali to join us. She is a educator, curriculum developer, and how have you seen this conversation changing over time, being in your line of work and in your own experience? Um, I'd love to get your insight from an education standpoint.
Yeah, of course. So I think what's interesting is when we talk about like the gender gap in STEM, it's really easy to focus on the numbers, like how many girls are taking physics in grade 11, 12, how many women are entering engineering. But I think what, has been kind of alluded to in this conversation is that we need to dig a little bit deeper, right? Like what we're talking about is a narrative of who belongs, right? Whether it's in a dance form or whether it's in STEM, like who belongs in STEM. And I think representation is a really important piece. And, we see that a lot. That's been happening over the last, 10, 15 years, giving kids an opportunity to see female scientists and engineers. So that piece is an important piece. But if we want to dig deeper in any kind of like gender gap, we have to look at that systemic issues, right? I think that we've alluded to that in this conversation too. And for generations past, and just hearing like Shruthi's story and Devika's experiences that were like 20 plus years ago, in those generations, like creativity and STEM have been mutually exclusive. Like they don't coexist, right? STEM is seen as like, it's analytical and the arts are creative, imaginative. So those are like two separate worlds. But what we're starting to see in the last 5 or so years, and there's still a lot of work to be done here, is that STEM is deeply creative. And I think that's something that we haven't really acknowledged in the last, 25, 30, even more years. Because the fact of the matter is that every single discovery begins with somebody asking, like, what if we try this in a different way? Why don't we think like outside of the box, right? How might we solve this in a new creative way? So that's inherently creative, right? And that's a thinking differently. Um, so if we want to close that gender gap, I think we need to tell that story to our girls, to our students, our kids, that STEM isn't just about solving like pre-existing equations. It's actually about like creating and designing and imagining new possibilities. And that's not a story that you and I heard in school, right? Like that's not the framing that we got about STEM in school. Um, because, the research that you pointed to does show that girls want to be creative. They love community building and collaboration. They want to make a difference in the world. Like that's something that, all the studies are showing is like social impact is really important for kids. But the way we teach STEM or have historically taught STEM kind of strips those elements away. And from a very early age, we've kind of tried to, or we've siloed STEM from the arts and humanities as if, those technical skills and creative expression are opposites, but they're not. Right? That divide doesn't even exist in the real world. Like if you go to post-secondary programs, if you go into industry, the most exciting cool innovations are coming from interdisciplinary teams working together, designers, coders, scientists, storytellers, like kind of working together in a very interdisciplinary manner. And I think like if I reflect on, my experiences, the challenges at the, education system level where those silos exist. We separate these worlds, we kind of have to, like, I'm just thinking of Devika. She had to choose, right? You have to choose which path you're going to take, and they're mutually exclusive paths. Um, and in my years as a STEM educator, what I've really tried to do is help illuminate for my students that creativity isn't separate from science, right? It drives it. And engineers don't just calculate forces. design bridges that connect communities, right? Programmers don't just code. They create experiences that shape how people interact with technology, can make social impact and drive change, right? So bringing the human back into the STEM, bringing the creativity, the innovation, the arts. And I think that, as we're embarking on this path, we will need to reframe STEM as a space for like imagination and design and human impact. And I think then we're going to start to shift the conversation. And it's not going to be like, how can we get more girls to be in STEM? But STEM is something that girls do, it's where they belong.
I just want to clap so loud right now. That's amazing. Yes, 100%. And that's exactly along those lines, exactly what Gail was talking about in that article, or what Dr. Post was talking about in that article, is that STEM is depicted in a certain way, in a certain light. And what a wonderful takeaway, Anjali. Thank you so much for teachers and educators and librarians, parents, on how we can talk about these fields with children growing up today. Absolutely, absolutely wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for adding that. We're also, and I wonder if Anjali would like to collaborate on this too, is we are working with a therapist on putting together some takeaways and tips for educators on how they would suggest talking to students about this whole conversation and how to combat some of those barriers and some of those stereotypes that they will undoubtedly come across as times change. And so, Anjali, I think your input would be fantastic for the article. We will definitely be reaching out to you for your input on that. And this has been such a great conversation. I am so excited for this conversation to reach educators and parents, and I truly hope it changes and helps them kind of look at how they have these certain conversations differently with their students. Ambika, I'll turn things over to you.
We are so grateful for all your input. I think it's been an incredible, different ways to look at the same issue and understand it in so many, in such a deeper way. That there are systemic barriers, there is ownership that girls need to feel, and this comfort that this narrative belongs to us, this space belongs to us. That we are, of course, things are changing, but we need to reframe how we think about different issues and different topics, and tell girls that these are, these fields of study are human. You need to bring your whole self to this and look at different ways to present these, so that we don't have this drop off of interest in certain areas, or they feel that, oh, girls really don't do this, because really girls can do anything. And I hope this remains the central message of the book and the conversation today. So thank you so much. We're so grateful to have all of you.